Hello and welcome to my channel. I am A. Rogan. If you are curious why my handle is named A. Rogan, it is short for Alex Rogan. If you are not familiar with the great classic B-movie sci-fi flick called The Last Starfighter, I highly recommend you check it out. It's from 1984 and you will not be disappointed. Today, in another tech review you didn't realize you needed, I'll be looking at the Gigabyte Aorus FI32U. This is a 4K 144Hz adaptive refresh. It is not G-Sync certified, but it's definitely G-Sync compatible gaming monitor. I've kind of fallen in love with the 4K 32-inch size monitor. I've had one that's only a 60 Hz panel, a cheap mono price that was about $300 for a couple of years now, but I have never really experienced true high refresh rate monitors until I recently got my Lenovo Legion 5 Pro, which has a 165 Hz Quad HD 16:10 display, and it is fantastic. Once you've gone high refresh rate monitors, it's really hard to go back. In the past, I always thought 60 Hz felt pretty silky, glassy, smooth, and now like 60 feels like the bare minimum I could live with, and getting into the hundreds feels much nicer. Now this monitor is unique in that it fills a pretty, what I consider a gaping hole in the gaming monitor space. There are almost no 4K 32-inch high refresh rate monitors currently released on the market. Now there's a few that are coming out, and there's one that already hit the market, but is priced crazy high. There is currently the Asus ROG Swift PQ32U QX, and that is a 32-inch 144Hz gaming monitor that also has micro LEDs, but it also costs $3,000, so it's probably priced out of most people's reach. Plus, it only has HDMI 2.0, so it's pretty much just hot garbage, so why would you even want this thing? Anyways, so the other couple of monitors that should be coming out soon, but we're not sure exactly when, they always say soon or in the summer, but we're pretty much there already and I still don't see them, is first the ViewSonic Elite XG320U, and then the Acer Predator XB323K. Those still haven't shown up. I'm not sure what the price point is, but I'm gonna guess that this Aorus is very competitively priced. At when I bought it, when it first came out at Newegg, it was $900, but now it's up to $1,000. If you are looking to watch a lot of HDR content or media, this is probably not the monitor for you. This is really more a high performance gaming IPS panel, and it only has like a peak of 400 nits, and it's HDR 400, which most people say isn't really real HDR. And in my opinion, I kind of agree. I don't think it's really worth it for HDR, so I just leave it off personally. So it's not going to be like a VA panel that would be cheaper, that would be more suitable for HDR content, but could have some black smearing. But this is really geared toward fast response rate IPS gaming. Just as a side note, I've also tried a 40-inch HDTV as a monitor briefly before I got the monoprice monitor. And at 40 inches sitting on your desk, it is just way too big for me. I mean, you kind of have to move your head around just to see all the corners. I felt games would be more immersive, but no, they just kind of made me motion sick, and it was just too big and too in your face. Maybe if I wall mounted it, or if you can sit further back, it might be acceptable. But overall, I found 40 inches just to be overwhelming and just not a great desktop experience. Of course, your mileage may vary and you may prefer that, and they are quite a bit cheaper. I did pick a really nice Sony one that was highly rated for computer usage from Artings with Chroma 444, but still, it wasn't for me. I returned it, and I'm much happier with the 32-inch size. So this review is going to be more of like a everyday using it impressions video. I don't really have the high-tech or measuring equipment I need to do proper monitor reviews. So I've been using this for about a month now with quite a bit of coding on it. Every day I've been coding, doing some production work like this video, and then of course a lot of gaming. So I'm just gonna tell you how I feel about it, giving you some opinions, but I'm hoping somebody like Hardware Unboxed or somebody will actually do a full-blown review on this, and you can get all the nitty-gritty details that way. Oh, and one more thing. Included in the box are high-speed HDMI 2.1 cables and DisplayPort 1.4 cables, so there's no need to buy additional cables, which is nice. So I purchased this monitor at Newegg when it was first available. It was only $900. Since then,
It's pretty much stayed in stock. I think it briefly went out of stock, but then the price raised up to $1,000, where it's been at ever since. This is actually my second monitor. The first one I received had a stuck pixel. It was a very bright white pixel, dead center, just right of dead center, and if you use a dark theme or you have black backgrounds, it was pretty noticeable, as you can see on screen. It was definitely spanned multiple pixels that were adjacent. And I thought about just living with it, but after like about 24 hours of use, it was definitely going to bother me. And when you're spending this much on a monitor, yeah, you kind of want it to be pretty close to perfect. The good news is that Newegg's return or exchange policy was really good, really smooth. Just a few clicks on their site, I was able to print out a return label and ship it to them, and I got it back within less than 2 weeks. And they paid for everything, so it cost me nothing. So overall, the exchange process went very smoothly. So here's a quick tour of my gaming setup and what I'm using to drive this amazing monitor. In the center, of course, is the 4K Aorus FI32U, 144 Hz panel. On either side, I just have some older Asus IPS 1080p 27-inch monitors. Just great for Discord and text and websites and other things as such, but don't really use them for gaming. But they were cheap and they work well and have good viewing angles. That's my Ducky 10 keyless mechanical keyboard with Cherry MX Browns, Logitech wireless mouse, and then down below, don't mind the horrible cabling. It's whatever. Down here, I'm running this pretty recently built new gaming rig. This is a Phanteks P500A case with the RTX 3090 Founders Edition, a Ryzen 5950X, 32 gigs of 3600 mega transfers per second RAM. Basically, you definitely want something of a 3080 equivalent or higher caliber to drive a full 4K display at anything greater than 60 frames per second. So that's what I would recommend. So as far as ports and connectivity options, there's quite a few, and they're all the latest spec. You have two HDMI 2.1 ports, so those are going to be great for your next-gen consoles like PS5 and Xbox Series X. I don't have those hooked up to this monitor since they are sitting over in the game room on a large screen TV. The DisplayPort 1.4 is how I have it currently hooked up to the RTX 3090. And then you have this kind of neat built-in KVM feature, which I have yet to test, but there is a USB Type B port that you see, the big square port that you connect to your computer. Then I have my mouse and keyboard connected to the two Type A ports, and these two Type A ports will swap with the Type C port if you have that hooked up to another computer, so you can KVM between the two. You also have a set of mic, headphone, and audio outputs that you can also use, especially useful if you're pulling audio off the HDMI port like a console. To split that audio out, you can use these ports. I have not tested them since I really don't have a use for them. So here we have some RGB options for the LED lights that are on the back of the monitor. I personally don't find a whole lot of use out of this since you don't see them, they're behind you. Unless you game in a completely dark room, you're not even going to see the light bounce off the wall or anything. I guess if you're a pro gamer and you're up on a stage or something, it's cool, but then you probably wouldn't be using a 4K 32-inch monitor anyway. So, but you know, everybody loves RGB, so more RGB. You can't control it through the software, so you can do different colors for the different sections of the LED lights. You can do different patterns if you want. I just have it on static, and I have it green to match the rest of my computer. And let's take a look behind the monitor so you can see what it looks like. Let's talk about this monitor stand. It's actually really sturdy. You can raise and lower it, you can rotate it, you can tilt it. So it has all the basics. It feels, it's a solid chunk of metal is what it is. But look how far these feet stick out. If you measure it from the base, back of the stand all the way to the tip, it's about 11 inches. So that's how much desk real estate you're going to need if you're going to use this stand, which For me, you have to have like a really deep desk, and most desks aren't that deep. Here's a typical IKEA computer desk, and you can see how far the feet would stick in if I were to use it. If the monitor didn't actually hang off the edge of the back of the desk, if it was sitting flush and all the weight was actually on the desk, these feet stick out 11 inches and would interfere with my mouse pad area. Now, if you play a lot of FPS or play some competitive games and you arm and wrist aim, and you do a lot of arm aiming, you need a lot of mouse pad space, so it would definitely interfere with my gaming. That would be unacceptable. So instead, I decided to use a monitor arm. Now, the thing you got to know about the monitor arm that I picked is it has to support at least 18 pounds, because without the stand, this monitor weighs 17 pounds and some change. And the one I got is only like 50 bucks or so, and it seems very sturdy and holds really well. And I could sit it pretty far back against the desk, and I have no more feet in the way, so it solved my problem. So let's talk a little bit more about the monitor stand. So the reason I chose this ER Gear one is it supports 26.4 pounds, which gives me some headroom since the monitor itself weighs 17 and change. And plus, if you look at this base, it's pretty big, so it more evenly distributes the weight across the desk. You'll see other monitor stands that have a really small plate at the top, and that could potentially focus all that weight into one spot on your desk. And if it's kind of a cheap IKEA desk like mine, it could potentially break through it. I've seen pictures of those, and so it definitely not something you want to happen. Also, you know, it's only 50 bucks, so it was pretty cheap. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's being sold on Amazon anymore. I did find an alternative by NB North Bayou, roughly the same price at 45 bucks. It looks very similar in design. The only thing I don't really like is this kind of yellow logo on the arms and on the front. Not very aesthetically pleasing, but maybe it's a sticker you take off, but I have no idea. Anyways, you might need to do some more research in this area, but the main things to look for is that 18 pounds or more. I like the gas spring, so it's easier to reposition the monitor. But other than that, yeah, just do a little bit of research, and I'm sure you'll find something to your liking. So while the computer is asleep and the monitor is in sleep mode, we can take a look at power usage, which is currently about 2 to 3 watts. Currently, we're just sitting at the desktop doing nothing, and power draw is looking to be around 50 watts. Here we are running Doom Eternal at 144 Hertz 4K, and also we are still running 50 watts, which I didn't expect any difference since it was running at 144 Hertz on the desktop too. Let's look at some basic settings you want to do right away. The first thing you want to adjust is to make sure that you are running at native resolution at 4K res. I like 150% text scaling just because my eyes aren't great and I like text actually readable from any distance at 4K. And then lastly, you want to make sure you click on advanced display settings and make sure you're set at 144 Hertz. Then hop over if you're running a NVIDIA card. I'm not sure about AMD, haven't had one in a while. But for NVIDIA and G-Sync setup, you just want to make sure you open NVIDIA control panel, go over to setup G-Sync. Make sure you select your correct monitor, and I have it enabled, and also have it enabled for windowed and full screen mode. I know some people say it's better just to use full screen mode only, but I like to run games sometimes in window borderless or window full screen. So I can easily access my other 2 monitors without having to get out of full screen. I also know that doing this, you might be applying G-Sync to your desktop, like if you're just coding or doing productivity. It doesn't seem to bother me much, so I leave it on windowed and full screen. Even though this is not a certified G-Sync monitor, I've had no issues at all using this with G-Sync. I see no tearing. It looks really good. Also, one more thing you want to make sure you change is go over to Manage 3D Settings. Drop down to vertical sync. This is the vertical sync inside the NVIDIA control panel, and you want to turn that on. For reasons why you want to do this is if you take a look at this article, I'll link it in the description. It explains about how you should set up G-Sync properly and why you should actually turn on V-Sync in the Manage 3D settings, and you can read more about that in the link below. Here's the pendulum demo, just showing G-Sync is properly running. You can see frame rates are fluctuating between like 40 and 90. I think G-Sync holds 48 to 144 on this monitor, and there's no tearing at all. It looks really good. Here's the standard UFO test showing the different frame rates. I have to say 144 looks really good, and once you go high frame rate, it's really hard to go back. Next, we'll take a look at overdrive mode with the ghosting test. Here it is with it off. This is Smart OD, which is what I normally leave it on. I think it's supposed to vary the amount of overdrive depending on frame rate. Not exactly sure how well that works. I don't really have any testing equipment, but just from visual inspection, Smart OD seems to look fine. I'm going to jump to quality next. This is quality. Balance. And finally speed. In speed, you can actually start noticing some of the ghost trails. For sure, there's a little bit of that. But Smart OD looks pretty good to me, so I just leave it on that. Next is a test of the black frame insertion, which Gigabyte calls aim stabilizer. Right now it is off, and then let's turn it on. It just looks a little darker to me, and I guess it looks a little bit more stable, but it's kind of hard for me to tell. That is black insertion on. Let's turn it back off. Now it's back off. This is with it off. And this is on. I tried it in gaming and a little bit Destiny 2 with it on, and I don't really notice enough difference, so I just leave it off just so it's a little bit brighter. So here's a test of local dimming. I have it currently turned off, and it looks a lot better than it does on the camera. There's not so much light bleed that you kind of see through the camera that I'm seeing in real life. But here it is with it off, and I'll turn it on here in a second. I just leave it off normally. Okay, now I'm going to turn it on. Now it's on. You can see almost this kind of glowing band that follows the dot. Yeah, I gotta say I'm not a fan of this mode. Definitely just leave it off. And here is how I normally play with HDR off. This monitor only has HDR 400 rating, which is about 420 peak nits. It's kind of pointless, so definitely do not buy this monitor if you're really into HDR and media consumption. But for gaming, productivity, and everything else, I think it's fine, and I don't think HDR implementation on Windows is all that great. It's better on consoles. So anyways, here it is, just running normal without HDR. Looks pretty good. Yes, I just got Vex Mytho class on. I'm happy. Time to just shove it into the vault. I know it's not that great, but it's a pretty unique weapon. Next, we're going to enable HDR and take a look again. So if you go to settings, display, HDR, turn it on here, and then also in our Windows settings, turn on HDR here. Okay, and then we will get back into the game. And here we are with HDR enabled. I did have to do a reboot after changing the Windows desktop setting to enable HDR. Things got a little weird, got a little flickery, but once I rebooted, everything's fine. The monitor is properly showing HDR is on. I have it enabled in Destiny. And I had to switch to full screen obviously because HDR only works in full screen. But other than that, it looks pretty good. I mean, I don't really have any other HDR display to compare it to, so I guess it looks fine. Things look a bit more saturated. I guess it's not bad, but in general I don't see a huge amount of benefit to enabling it, so I'm probably just gonna leave it off.
So here's the previous shown footage, but side by side. I have the HDR off on the left and HDR on the right.
So let's go over this other neat feature I found, this OSD Sidekick companion app that you can install. I'll leave the link down in the description, but you just download and install it, and as long as you have your monitor hooked up to USB, you can fire up this guy and basically adjust most of your settings through this app versus the menu in the monitor. Now, I haven't tried a whole lot of things in here, but you can set up hotkeys, adjust your LEDs. I showed the LED software earlier, and you launch it from here. This is some of the audio stuff I haven't tested, which is the active noise canceling and audio output stuff. I haven't touched any of that. Here's how you can switch easily between the different sets of USB ports for KVM. And also there's a way to update the firmware. Now, I could have sworn earlier when I checked this site that the F02 firmware was posted, but I can't seem to find it anymore. But it didn't really matter because the firmware already had F02, so there was no reason to update. One kind of neat option is this crosshair that you can put on the screen. I know some people like this to always have a crosshair. Maybe if you snipe a lot, it doesn't really impact me that much. I don't think it's that great, but you can actually customize and paint different ones than the default one. So if you click on the little editor, you can really draw your crosshair pixel by pixel, any colors you want, save it, and it'll actually upload it into the monitor. It's really kind of cool. The only thing you can't really adjust here, it looks like, is alpha, kind of like transparencies, but you can choose a color that you would like that maybe doesn't pop as much. So yeah, I like it. It's very cool. This monitor also has picture-in-picture features, which, wow, what a blast from like the 80s. But I guess some people might find it useful. I have not tested it, nor will I, because I will never use it. So some final thoughts on this monitor. I've never really experienced a high refresh rate monitor before until very recently with my Lenovo Legion 5 Pro, which is 165 Hertz, and before that on the desktop I was using a 4K 60 Hertz panel, 32-inch for a long time, just a cheap monoprice one, which is fine for productivity but wasn't really great for gaming. And after building this new desktop gaming rig, really needed a good monitor to do it justice and definitely want to do real 4K gaming. And so this monitor fit the bill. Really, there's not much else on the market at this price range like it at this size. I've been really happy with it. Sure, $900 and now $1,000 is pretty steep. Could be a little bit cheaper, but in the current market we are in with technology products, I felt it was semi-reasonable, and overall I'm really satisfied and happy with it. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it if you made it to the end. Like and subscribe if you wish. And I'm not sure when I'll post something new, but basically it's whenever I buy something interesting that I think y'all would be also interested in.